Once you have completed your chipboard sculpture and you can see that it stands, you are going to actually start to build this sculpture in clay. I'm going to start by actually taking apart the chipboard sculpture, and I'm going to use all of these pieces to help me cut out my shapes in clay. Make sure the slab that you've rolled is large enough that your piece fits. And make sure you have rolled out all your slabs following the how-to tutorial on rolling a slab old school style. Lay down your chipboard, hold it in place, cut out your pieces with your pin tool. Try to get as many shapes as you can cut out of one slab. If you've rolled your slabs correctly, they should be 1/4 of an inch. They should be compressed. And so you should have no cracking issues. My suggestion for starting this project is getting all of your pieces cut out first. And then you can let your pieces start to stiffen up so that you can build with them. Once you have all of your pieces cut out, you're going to want to let them sit out for a little while. The smaller pieces will dry faster, and the larger pieces will dry a little slower. And so you have to be very careful, and you have to monitor your clay. Some small shapes may only take maybe an hour to be dry enough to work with, and some larger shapes could take a few hours. And so you're going to have to be very careful and monitor your clay and make sure that it is ready for you to build and that it isn't too soft or has not dried out too much. You also want to take your extra clay scraps from your slab and roll them back together and put them back into your plastic bag. So don't leave all of these scraps. You can smush them together, knead them together, and so long as it's soft workable clay, you can bag that up. Okay, so I need to work with gravity and not against it. And I know that this piece is not going to stand up the way that I want it to until the slabs have dried enough. So after I smooth my edges, we don't want to have any sharp corners from cutting with the pin tool, kind of cleaning up some of my cut marks. I always do initial cleaning, and then once the piece has stiffened, I'll go in and do extensive cleaning, but I just want to get rid of those sharp edges. So I'm going to start to curve, and I'm going to start to look at it from the angle that I can envision it built based off of my sketch. It helps to have your sketches in front of you, and I can start to figure out what that might look like if it were to eventually stand. And I can start to bend my other pieces into the correct shape that I want them. If you bend your pieces early, it will allow them to start to dry in that shape, which will give you extra structural integrity. So I'm kind of laying out my design. And then you're going to see me start to cut 45-degree angles into my pieces. And the reason I do this is that it fits the angle of the original piece, and so that it has a flush attachment. And you'll do 45-degree angles anytime you're building an enclosed shape, such as a cube or maybe a pyramid. And I'm also doing it for this because otherwise my edges do not touch the bottom portion of the largest triangle flush. I'm just kind of lightly marking where those line up and where they touch so I know where to put my score marks. And I think the easiest way for me to build this is actually going to be upside down. So I can put my score marks in. Your score marks need to be close together. They should be cross-hatched and they should be deep into the clay. And then I'm going to use this roll of tape as a prop to kind of hold up that curve. Add some slip. And then stick and push down so you've created some pressure. I'm going to take a little bit of extra clay to use as a support because if I were to release my thumb, that piece would fall. So you really need to get used to using supports when you are working in slab. Slab also requires one additional step when scoring and slipping. After you've scored and slipped, you have to roll tiny baby coils, and using your modeling knife and some water, blend that coil into the wall and up into the shape. So you're really locking it in place and then smoothing it away so you can't ever tell that coil was added. These are called blended seams. Everywhere you have a seam where two different clay shapes are joined together, you have to run that small coil in between the seam and blend it out. Always smooth your edges as you go. I do as much smoothing as I can while the clay is plastic, but it's easier to clean as it gets closer to leather hard, so I will go back in and do quite a bit of cleanup work on this at a later stage. Cutting my angle so it sits flush. Apply a little bit of pressure and push. Add another support so it doesn't fall. And I go right back into adding my baby coils. You really have to make sure everything is level. I'm building this upside down, so I have to be sure that each separate piece I add is flush with the next. Otherwise, when I turn this right side up, it's not going to stand up correctly. It will be crooked. So you have to be looking at this from all angles and measuring and making sure your shapes are even. You also don't want to be moving your slab sculptures around. You should be building on your wear board, and you shouldn't try to lift this sculpture. You shouldn't try to move it. When I am done building today, I'm going to wrap it in plastic right where it's at, so that way nothing can break off of it. I won't be able to complete the construction today because I need this portion to stiffen up enough that I can turn the sculpture right side up to put the spikes on the top. So I will have to come back to this and add the 3 remaining triangles on top once the clay is stiff enough that I can do so. The smaller your coils are that you use for blended seams, the easier it is to blend them. If you can still see the coil when you are done, then it is not doing its job. You need to blend it completely so it joins the 2 pieces of clay and makes them seem like they are one. So you can see it from the side. You can see my supports holding each shape in place until it can support itself. Those supports can stay in there as long as I need them to. They're not hurting anything. In fact, the longer the better. And then I'm going to show you how to wrap this appropriately. I'm going to stack my 3 small shapes together, and if it's going to take you a little while to come back to this project, I might put some wet paper towel around them. And you definitely want to be very careful with wrapping the bag. You don't want to knock your supports out, but you don't want to leave air trapped inside because slab construction will dry out faster than any other type of construction method. So you really got to be watching your project. Sometimes if you have a spray bottle, you can mist it with a little bit of water before you put the bag over the piece. And so without me moving the sculpture, I'm coming in and I'm tucking that bag around it. This is a garbage bag, so it's thicker than the Meijer and Kroger bags. If I were using a Meijer bag, I'd use 2.